25th anniversary of MIT making a decision to make all of their publications available on open access. So some done, but more to do. I'm just going to start by introducing the IFLA Library Publishing section to you. So our mission is to advance library publishing globally. And library publishing is predominantly the publication of diamond open access materials that is free to read and free to publish, including journals, monographs, open educational resources, open textbooks, and other materials across a variety of languages and on a variety of platforms. Library publishing supports open scholarship and institutional goals. It builds on librarian expertise and competencies, and very importantly, it promotes bibliodiversity. So the library publishing section holds regular webinars and events on library publishing topics. We maintain a blog. It's the library publishing through the IFLA Global Lens. And we would really welcome contributions from anybody in the library publishing community. So do get in touch. We share best practice and case studies. We connect global library publishing colleagues. And, do consider registering your library publishing activities on the IFLA Library Publishing Map of the World. Whoops, Daisy. We have a strategic affiliation with the Library Publishing Coalition, which is based in North America. And this affiliation and partnership strengthens global collaboration and knowledge sharing. And we jointly sponsor an international scholarship to the Library Publishing Forum. That's going to be held in Seattle, Washington in May this year. And the winner of our scholarship is from Egypt, and she will be in attendance. We've run a number of shared events. We ran one in November 2024 that attracted a lot of people, empowering communities, shaping open scholarly publishing in Europe and beyond. And we work together to distribute the Library Publishing Coalition's survey, which informs the Library Publishing Directory and the IFLA Library Publishing Map of the World. And this is our IFLA Library Publishing Map of the World. So there's a lot of information in there. It's all on our website. We will, of course, be in attendance at the World Libraries and Information Congress in Busan in South Korea this summer. And we'll be holding an open session on artificial intelligence and library publishing. We're also going to collaborate on another open session with SCORE and ARL sections, and that's going to be on Diamond Open Access Publishing. So do keep in touch with us, and that's just a little bit about us. So I'm going to just stop sharing. I'm going to introduce you to the first of our three speakers, just to say that the Q&A will be after the three presentations. If you can think of any questions in the meantime, do add them to the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker. It's Dr. Patrick Paul Walsh. Paul is currently on secondment to the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network as Vice President of Education and Director of the SDG Academy. He is Professor of Global Affairs and Sustainable Futures and Director of the University College Dublin MSc in Sustainable Development in partnership with the SDG Academy. Paul, the floor is yours. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jane. And thanks for the very kind invitation. So as you know, OER is a bit of a hobby horse for me, and hopefully I'll get that across. But as I'm sharing, I might just give you one little bit of a motivation why maybe I have such a focus on open education resources. I'm going to share that from the beginning there. So a little bit of a story. So in Ireland, I won't mention names or whatever, but there was a couple of librarians who made sure that in their library, a public library, that any sort of Leaving Cert books, whether they were out of date or grey material, were there in the library, and also exam papers and answers to exam papers, etc. And there are kind of stories of people who are dropped out of school. So there's no school, no teachers, but because of the free open education resources and a place to come, they used them and studied them and did the state exam and got into university. So that's just an example of what we're talking about here, I think, in terms of, and then in the digital side, part of me, not part of me, all of me feels that in this day and age with our digital platforms and AI and all the digital objects, that we can actually provide open educational resources anywhere on the planet, whether refugee camps or anywhere. And we can build on that then to provide education at all levels, right? Whether it's K-12 or high school or what we or university or labor force and beyond for say young teenagers who are out of work and out of education. So open education resources are really important, and we do have a UNESCO OER recommendation, which was signed by all member states in 2019, which I'll go through at a later date. But there is a commitment by governments all over the world to provide free open education resources at all levels of education as well. So they are very, very important. So I don't have to go over who I am. Just to explain SDSN a little bit. So I can't believe we're back here again, in the sense that in 2027, we will begin the process of under the General Assembly, or under what's called the High-Level Political Forum, under the auspices of the General Assembly in 2027, we'll start the process, the 3-year process of looking at what happens post-2030 and what will happen to the SDGs and so on. The High-Level Political Forum is a body which actually reviews the SDGs from a governmental and non-governmental point of view globally. And I would say they're not going to be there to get rid of the SDGs. Hopefully they're there to extend them to 2030 or to reform them or to change them in some way. But we'll see what happens. But people are already preparing for the starting line, and we'll have their documents for post-2030 and 2027. And people, on your marks, get set, go, and we'll have a big open consultation and see what happens post-2030. And of course, IFLA will be there, just thinking about reminding people about the importance of libraries, the importance of open science and open education resources and open data and so on. SDSN in 2012, this was 3 years to 2015, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who was a special advisor to Ban Ki-moon at the time, in Rio Plus 20, there's a mandate for SDSN to provide legal and academic oversight over all the work plans that were going to happen over 3 years of work and consultation. So in a sense, that's where SDSN was born, and at the time was co-chaired by Amina Mohammed and Jeffrey Sachs. Amina Mohammed is now the Deputy Secretary General with responsibility for sustainable development. And SDSN, after that mandate, and we did a census report for the Secretary General of those consultation processes, 3 years of them, and many work plans, governmental, non-governmental. Then with David Donoghue of Ireland and Ambassador Kamau of Kenya, there was 9 months of negotiations, which created our Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or you might call it the SDGs, which is one component. From September 2015, SDSN became more like a think tank into the Secretary General's area. And it has basically 3 dimensions, SDSN. One is 2,000 basic universities or knowledge institutions across the world who are committed to working with all partners, including government and non-governmental and private sector, to implement the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the biodiversity frameworks at all levels of governance. And that means local government, national government, regional, global, but also governance inside universities or inside associations like IFLA. It's to orientate them all to care people and care planet in particular. You might know SDSN from our data work, and the Paris office mainly produces what's called the happiness report. You might see that, the ranking of countries by happiness, or the SDG dashboard, which is to rank countries on their achievement or performance on the SDG targets and indicators. And what I'm responsible for is the SDG Academy, which is an open education resource. It was established initially so that the UN system and stakeholders would actually upskill and reskill on the SDGs, because you're in UNICEF, but you have to take into account the environmental issues. You're not necessarily trained on that, right? So initially, that's what it was. Today, I'll explain the Academy in the next slide. We provide open education resources or content. So we have about 60 MOOCs that are free. Some are on edX, others are on other platforms. But all the content on edX or LinkedIn or anywhere you see it is in our library, where you can download the MP4s and you can actually transform or translate or do anything you want to them, right? They're a Creative Commons license on all of those resources. So there's about 2 million minutes of content in the library, and we've already certified over 1.2 million people on the SDG courses that are free and open. Just because courses are free, our content is free, doesn't mean it's used. So that's why it's very important. This is myself and Neil Brennan called the Diamond Partnerships, our Diamond engagements, rather than just open access, Diamond open access. Just because it's free to produce and free to use doesn't mean it's used. You need a kind of community or community of practice around it, right? So we've been doing a lot more work, working with universities to embed them in degrees, working with governments to embed them in their HR or kind of LMS or professional development platforms, with civil society, and so on. And so this is what we call our kind of communities of practice. And one kind of key committee I'll come back to is a joint committee on the implementation of the OER recommendation that we run with UNESCO. And I'll just tell you those activities in a while. We also are working on thought leadership. I guess that's what the webinars are here about, which is to turn up on blogs or publication or UN events, just reminding people of the power and importance of education at all levels and the importance of open education resources as the kind of foundation stone to be capable of delivering any sorts of accreditation of professional training. I just want to give you an example of one of the courses. So the Pact for the Future was probably the last consensus document that we're going to have for a while in the UN because of the US pulling out and other things. So most UN meetings now focus on an outcome of what's called, they map the outcome to the action plans and Pact for the Future, which is a document about implementation, it's a document about reform, and it's also a document about the post-2030 agenda. And it has the 5 sections there, which I'll talk about. The most important for the OER conversation may be the Global Digital Compact, because that is the first, if you like, intergovernmental agreement on, it's the first intergovernmental agreement on how we regulate or how we use digital platforms and technology. And I've always said that one of the things they don't like is fragmentation of platforms, you know, across China, Europe, and other places for the sharing of knowledge. But I always try to remind people that libraries, particularly public libraries would say something like DSpace, are a completely interoperable platform for sharing information right across the world, and it's completely free, right? So in other words, there's a public digital highway which you can use globally, and people should use it. And it's going to be, I come back to that for the use of OER. There's a course I run, it's an overlay. I summarize all the policy briefs and the segments of Pact for the Future and the World Social Summit, but I do an overlay of what I think are good academic lectures and all the different issues in chapter 1 to chapter 5. But this is an example of an open education resource, which is targeting the missions and the capitals of governments in terms of them knowing what the Pact for the Future really is and how they can potentially implement it. Just to say, have some skin in the game, I am talking about open education resources, but myself and Neil Brennan digitalized even very early, actually. This was back in about 2007. We actually scanned this in at the time to do digital recognition, and we've archived this as an open science resource, or open, it's called a diamond publication, I think we call it now. So we did, this was a statistical society that goes back to 1847. So after the Irish famine, the academics got together with stakeholders, including government folks, to discuss how we get out of the problem socially and economically. And they had 7 public meetings where they published in a journal, which was then obviously deposited in a library, and it was free. And then in 2007, we digitalized it. And again, it's an example. We have it on an open journal system. We have it in Web of Science. It's just an example of a community basically creating an open science or a diamond publication and running it, having a business plan. I think one of the key messages I'd give from running this, the archive, it's a DSpace archive and an open journal system on top of it. The key kind of message is, why is there a sustainability plan? It's a sustainability plan because the people, we create content that there's a demand for. So the government departments, all economic departments, all government departments, universities pay a couple of $100 a year so that we can actually run the journal. And they pay because it's co-created in the sense that it is a dialogue between the scientists and the policy. It's a typical science policy statistical society interface. And because they pay, like then it actually succeeds. So some people go, why can't we break the cycle of academic publication? But the problem with academic publication is that it's demanded by academics, and it's all about academic citations for rankings. It's actually not for policy. It's not for corporates. It's not for NGOs. It's not for impact or society at all. It's actually to get those citations and get up the rankings. And that's how, so the real, if you really want to understand how to break this cycle of publications, whether they're golden publications or golden open access, or how to break that cycle, you really have to tell the universities that they should be writing not for themselves, but for policy work, for policy impact, for corporate impact or NGO or societal impact at large, because that then breaks the cycle and it justifies it's a global public good, why governments should pay for it, why there's a demand for it, and so on. This is just an example of SDG Academy is partnering with the University of West Indies, Dar es Salaam, Sunway University, University College Dublin, and so on, where we supply the open education resources that we have, which is digital content. And we basically, with a service contract, we actually deposit into the LMSs of the different courses all the materials on the SDGs that you want. We also provide TAs, we can provide different resources. But the point is that once you have these Creative Commons licenses on your digital objects and you have open education resources, they actually can enhance the LMSs of universities a lot. So in UCD, we use Brightspace. In other places, they use Canvas, or they might use Blackboard. There's kind of different LMSs. And then we also create a pathway where we do prior learning on edX to recruit people. For people who haven't got an undergraduate, like say a 2-1 or maybe different professional training, we allow them to do a professional diploma, but they can offset their credits and their credits and fees against the actual masters. And then you can go on to do an MSc in Sustainable Development, which is in partnership with the SDG Academy. But this is an example how you can do a global master's using open education resources, and you can keep the price relatively low so that there's access to actually having a master's, which is really important for those in the UN who are working in Sudan, for example, or Lebanon or other places that, you know, it's not easy with a family or in a placement to actually do a master's on site. So having an online master's with this type of support in placement and in digital resources is actually very important. So one thing myself and Lee Brennan introduced in a paper, in a forthcoming chapter in a book, is there's a lot of chat about open science, open data, open education resources, and a lot of confusion. But from our point of view, these are all digital objects, and they can all be stored in whatever LMS or whatever archive or platform that you're using. So from our point of view, if I'm teaching a course in a syllabus, yeah, I'm using MP4s, but I'm also using PDFs of research books. I'm also using homeworks and exercise and PowerPoint slides and so on, right? And they all can be, metadated and tagged and put into a folder, a kind of a network of digital objects, which we call open education resources. But open education resources do encompass, obviously, PDFs or published papers and other digital objects like data, etc. So a lot of the time when we're creating open education resources, we're always looking for the textbooks and the papers and the pictures and all the resources that are obviously Creative Commons license, and then embed them into the work we do, or else we create the resources ourselves. But we call this a global knowledge commons, that knowledge objects, particularly digital objects, are all, we kind of think of them all as one thing. And they can be used then as open education resources to develop education for sustainable development, whether it's in universities or whether it's in corporates or whether it's in NGOs or whether it's in refugee camps or etc. This is the way forward. But it's basically just trying to say all these digital objects, you've got to be very careful to make sure they're free and open licensed. So a lot of the game for me is on the licensing, actually. Not necessarily the technologies, it's the licensing is the real game changer. I wrote this paper in IAU in Horizons a few years ago just about this type of global knowledge, and just to try and tell people that, you know, we do need knowledge for sustainable development. We do need to be at the frontier of that knowledge. It needs to be created by everyone, and every knowledge, we need to be able to harvest the knowledge from everyone, and everyone needs to create it. We need to be able to access it, transfer it, put it into use. The problem about knowledge is that it's paywalled. And, you know, we're not at our frontier at all. So first thing is, as we know, knowledge is not always free to create. In other words, like people submit to Nature a great idea and they have to pay $11,000, if you like, to get it into the knowledge commons. That's not free to create. It's not free to access, and it's not free to orientate into, say, parliamentary libraries or into training for professional training in corporates or into university degrees. And the other thing about this type of knowledge is it's not always for the good. Like, this knowledge is not necessarily, it can be about weapons, it can be about, you know, the war industry. Is not necessarily about orientating knowledge to the public good or for achieving the SDGs. The other thing is, it's not easy to transfer this knowledge across institutions, particularly from, say, the high-income countries to low-income countries. So when we looked at, say, the Wealth of Nations, or we look at any economic textbooks about how nations grow, it's all about knowledge, embedding knowledge and skills into the labor force. But one thing that's very important for catching up a convergence is that there should be an easy transfer of knowledge across nations. And like, say, the COVID vaccine was developed in a university with taxpayers' money, but it ended up in a corporate and it wasn't shared. But this is the same with any knowledge. Any knowledge that's in a University College Dublin course or in a publication by University College Dublin, I mean, most people produce that and are very open to have it cited, to have it used, but somehow it gets stuck in some paywall or some platform where it's not easily transferable at all and not freely accessible. And this knowledge is important. It's actually important knowledge, which could, in a very small way maybe, but it would mean that it could be a step forward for somebody in a low-income country which cannot access this knowledge. So we do have to start thinking about, do we have these digital highways? Are we able to create this content with Creative Commons licenses? Are we able to transfer it easily? Do we know how it can be used and transformed and repurposed for whatever, you know, in a government department or in a parliamentary setting or in an NGO or in a corporate, right? So, and the foundation stone for all of this is open education resources where you are free to create them and use them under Creative Commons license and stored appropriately and archived and metadataed and preserved. Do what librarians do, basically, to this resource. So just to say, this idea of the diamond engagement, when I was on the social science committee of Science Europe, going back to 2015, again, myself and Eve wrote this paper. I said, like, your focus is very much on the diamond publication, on the diamond OER, that free to create, free to use, but you're not focusing on the community. You're not focused on what we call the diamond engagements, that you've got to look at how knowledge is created, to where it's put, how it's used, and you've got to look at all the partnerships in the supply and demand of it, in the digital, the licensing, and to understand how they all work together to be able to deliver a kind of diamond publication or a diamond engagement. So with that in mind, we set up this Joint Committee on Open Education Resources, and you can see it's registered there on a what's called a partnership platform on the HLPF. You can have a look at who the partners are. And the Open Education, the UNESCO Open OER Recommendation 219 has basically, as I say on the slide, 5 action areas. And this is the whole community thing. You've got to build capacity in all the stakeholders who are involved in creating OER. You've got to be able, to create it, access it, reuse, adapt, redistribute, etc. There has to be supportive policy. So, for example, when Ireland had this new climate change and sustainable development course, and it got all the academics to create the curriculum, and it was with the Department of Education, they created all these lovely education resources. They shouldn't have handed it over to Poland. They had to put this into an OER, into maybe Trinity College Dublin, and ask them to archive it and then give it to all the schools for free and update it for free. They didn't need to give it away and then all the schools and everyone had to pay money for it, and they'll have to do it each and every year because the papers change or they change a chapter and so on. So policy is important here. So again, I see the Irish government using taxpayers' money, working with what I call commercial companies like Elsevier Science and others, basically saying, we'll give you a heap of money, and that means the academics can publish the papers for free, and that to the academics, and then they can be used for free or open access or golden open access. But that's not supportive policy. I mean, supportive policy would ban that, and it would actually say that what you produce from particularly government money and government resources, you have to have components that are OER or open science and policy briefs or whatever. And maybe you want to publish in these branded commercial journals, but your content, if it's funded by the taxpayer, has to be actually a component of it has to be open access or diamond open access and diamond open education resource. And of course, we start thinking about making sure it's inclusive and equitable on terms that anyone in a low-income country can create the resource and use it. And sustainability models are basically talking about who finances this, right? But at the end of the day, global public goods have to be funded by the taxpayer because that's the nature of global public goods. But you'd be surprised how there are value addeds that you can potentially use to fund an open education resource, where people can actually, because it's a Creative Commons license, you can put a mixed license where if it's commercialized, you can actually share the rents in the component of the element that's commercialized, but you want to keep obviously the foundational stuff or the raw material without it being transformed to anything free and open access. In the third, one of the activities we did as part of this partnership was the third World OER Education Congress. We ran it in Dubai. And here it was just about updating the 219 recommendation for the emerging technologies that are happening, including AI and the emerging sort of roadmap for the Global Digital Compact, which was emerging. And this is in a thing called the Dubai Declaration, which is just an addendum to the OER. But it does write down the principles and gives you a good idea of how in the digital world we want to actually take a lot of the great ideas that were in the 219 recommendation and update them for the emergence of these new technologies. Just to give some idea, and I'm nearly finished, of the diamond engagement, as I call it, it takes a community or a global village to actually create OERs, right? In the sense that we're going to be very careful about creating contents for the SDGs. So you might want to write down some ethical principles about what you're putting in archiving and what you're creating. So there's all sorts of great work on care and fair and forest principles. And so that's all a great work, which is translated though into the licensing and into the metadata and into the taxonomies. of the sort of platforms that you're using. You obviously are keeping an eye on all the great technologies that are emerging to be capable, like and the licensing that's emerging. And then you've got to be careful about the users, like who at the end of the day wants these content. Is it the UN system? Is it the governments, the parliamentary systems? Like, is it the corporates need them? Like, who are you actually producing the content for? Because they're likely to pay membership fees, and they're likely to fund and give philanthropic money towards it and create a sustainable model. So I'll stop here, and hopefully I was a little bit coherent, and I got across a little bit the importance of open education resource. And I'm quite serious about this, that if you let knowledge created for free, archived for free, accessed for free, reusable, repurposed for free, and you let it flow across the world, this will have a remarkable impact on economics, economic performance, but also on societal and environmental outcomes and other things. So this is not a small topic or an unimportant topic. It's actually a key foundation stone for capabilities to achieve sustainable development.
That's fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much. That was a really interesting talk, and I love what you're saying about kind of joining everything up together. That, like, you know, separated stakeholders are not accomplishing what we need to accomplish here. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Associate Professor Glenda Cox, and she works in the Centre for Innovation in Learning and Teaching at the University of Cape Town, where she leads the Digital Open Textbooks for Development initiative. She holds the UNESCO Chair in Open Education and Social Justice. So thank you so much, Glenda. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Share my slides. Thank you for having me here from Cape Town, very far away, the other end of Africa. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and thank you so much, Paul, for a fantastic presentation. There will be a couple of things I might overlap on. Well, not really, actually, but there are in my slides, and you'll see hopefully how things fit in. So I wear a number of different hats, and I kind of wear them consistently, and I'll be wearing them today as well. So fundamentally, I'm an academic at the University of Cape Town, and my priority is around the students that I teach, and my priority is around the community, around the university. So I work towards thinking about open education in the context of my students, but also in the context of South Africa and Africa. So that's kind of my focus and kind of where I'm positioned. I also I have this UNESCO position, which is also very interesting. So we're talking about that as well, and how trying to kind of mobilize that to make a difference globally, but also bring that knowledge back to South Africa. I'm on the board of the Open Education Global Organization with Paola, actually, and a proud global OER graduate network alumni. So I've been very fortunate in that I've had these, so that's the University of Cape Town. So I have to put a picture in. This is our upper campus. Just a little context about that. We have about 35,000 students. So medium-sized, I would say. It's a residential institution. We have, it's a few online courses, but it's mostly face-to-face. Our staff contingent is around 2,000 permanent staff, but it probably goes up to about 4,000 in total with part-time staff. So that is my context. This is the upper campus. We have various campuses around Cape Town, law and medicine and so on. So very much a kind of university town, and we're positioned kind of on the side of the mountain, which sometimes is not a good thing because what we don't want to be is this institution that is not grappling with the issues of community, and this is where open education really comes through very strongly as a very important way of making sure that knowledge is a public good. So just a couple of things about me. So we've done quite a lot at the University of Cape Town. We've been doing work in open since 2007, researching open, and we have an open repository. And yeah, we've just been really interested, have various colleagues that I've worked with over the years. And I started working mostly in open in 2010. And this slide is a whole bunch of people. And I think that's also something that's just so important, that what's helped all of us to make any kind of difference is this idea of community and working together, and supporting each other and helping each other to grow. So I've been very lucky to be still part of communities, but also been part of really interesting communities. The Africa in the left-hand corner with openness across it is around the primary driver of doing all of this work at UCT, right from back in 2007, when this was quite new, this idea of open education and open education resources, was to bring African knowledge to the fore, to help to make African knowledge visible, to share our resources for ourselves across our countries in Africa, but also for everybody. And it's been an exciting journey looking at, and with Jill Claassen will also be able to comment on this, looking at what's happened, who's been using the materials. And there is really a global reach, but a very strong reach from South Africa. And that makes us very happy that these resources have been used. But that surely was the vision, was to make African knowledge visible. So as I said, I'm part of the UNESCO Chairs program. Initially, it's been very exciting, the work. Initially, I wasn't quite sure how UNESCO worked. And Paul is obviously quite steeped in the kind of UN UNESCO work. And at first, I wasn't quite sure what the advantage of it was. But it's been a really interesting journey that's taken a few years. My chair started in 2022, and I've just renewed it. But it's also given me the opportunity to really open doors, and build networks. And one of the networks I want to talk a little bit about today, hopefully, something new for you. But what we're trying to do, what happens at UNESCO is you have individual chairs, but you can also put chairs together who have a common theme. And that enables kind of global sharing of ideas, and working together. And so we've managed to form this kind of open education network. And as you can see, and in fact, this map is the current map, but we're getting new members in as well. So this can grow. But as you can see, it's exciting in that we have members from the global south, from the global north, and which is wonderful. So we have this very rich conversation going. There's no funding really. There's a small project I'm going to tell you about, but it has been so interesting to hear what other people are doing. And so we're trying to kind of build projects around this, and I'll talk about one of them in a few minutes. So open education, we've kind of spoken about it kind of in a general way, and also from a UNESCO perspective. But open education is huge worldwide. There are so many universities that put their weight firmly behind it, and today is the 25th anniversary of MIT deciding that they would make their course materials open education resources, or as they're called then, open courseware. So it's a momentous day, 25 years on. This is just a little tiny snapshot of some of the organizations, and it's universities and organizations and aspects of government. We've got UNESCO, you see Creative Commons there. These are just a few examples of quite a global and powerful movement that is continuing to grow. And I would like to say now, with so much support from UNESCO, but also support especially from libraries, and I feel there's a momentum that's more exciting than ever. I'm not going to go through these again. Paul touched on them. I just wanted to kind of also talk about the Cape Town Open Education Declaration, probably because I'm from Cape Town, but that was in 2007, and it's a really interesting document to read. Great foresight as to what might happen with the open education movement, and that was revisited in 2017. And then, as Paul said, we have the OER recommendations and the more recent Dubai Declaration. So these rock solid policy documents that can help to guide us on our pathway in open. We also have this UNESCO OER Dynamic Coalition, just another place that if you're interested in getting involved, interested in learning more, it's a really nice global platform that has been created with very interesting seminars and so on that happen quite regularly. You can just see from even just some of the sort of titles that come up here, you can see that it's quite relevant to this conversation and might be relevant to your conversations as you move away from the seminar. So something to look at, the Dynamic Coalition portal. And with any of these things, if there are no links specifically in the slides, you're more than welcome to contact me and ask for any of those links. This is the OER world map. So I was really interested to see IFLA's map as well. And it's just interesting to see the kind of mapping and the clustering and what's happening. This is slightly out of date. I think there's actually 5,800 roughly entries now. It's completely voluntary that this happens. People just decide to kind of add that they're involved in an open education project. But really, I think really rewarding if we have a look at the kind of scope of, great representation in South America, better representation in Africa now than there was before. And so this is something that we're continually growing and working with. And we're hoping to see more dots spread out so that this kind of idea of open education is a truly global phenomenon. So just kind of honing back in, I'm going to hone back in and then I'm going to hone back out. And these are my two wonderful colleagues at the University of Cape Town. Michelle Wilmers, who unfortunately has just left us to go and do some other work, but also Bianca Masuku. And we have this project called Digital Open Textbooks for Development. So at the University of Cape Town, we looked at open education resources very broadly. We have all the work done in the library around the open repository and the Open Monographs Press. But what we wanted to really kind of implement and advocate for was open textbooks. So we've been working in this project since 2018. And it's actually an initiative at UCT now. So we can support our academics who are interested in actually making open textbooks. So this has been very exciting and really interesting work. Working with academics who are the authors of these open textbooks across all subjects at the University of Cape Town, but also very interesting how we found during our process of research that students becoming increasingly involved in co-authoring these textbooks and involved in quality assurance, involved in looking at assessment, case studies, kind of localizing the materials. So these, I must add, and this is what Paul was kind of saying, was, this idea of global open education resources. What we want is to have global resources from everywhere. And, whether it can be a resource that's localized, certainly, but local resources are also really useful. And this is what we're trying to build and trying to get that knowledge out there. And one of the ways is to include students, because students have the experience of their lived realities and they can tell, they have the link to the community that is so important. And they have this real understanding of their own challenges. And so when they're helping creating a textbook on whatever the subject is, even if, let's say something like marketing, they understand the market because they're in the market. And so they can bring local examples. It's just one small example, but we've worked with students a lot, which is very exciting. My time. This is these are some of our students. So what we thought to do was to start kind of little student fellows. And so some of these students have worked on a lot of the open textbooks that we've designed and open textbooks that we were busy creating. We kind of brought them in to be fellows where we could do writing workshops with them, and they've just submitted a paper together around their reflections on open education. So we're trying to build this kind of future generation of open educators. And they've done kind of a whole bunch of research on what they felt was important for open education, focusing on equity, that open education can be a vehicle for social and economic mobility, ensuring that all learners have the opportunity to thrive, and really kind of in-depth and astute kind of grappling with the issues around open education and their responses. And very interested in aspects of decolonial pedagogy and social justice. So that was what the students had to say. And then they organized their own student symposium, which was a great success. Had students from a number of different universities in South Africa, both online and face-to-face. And it was really an extraordinary event and completely organized by students. So we're going to hopefully do more of these kinds of things. That's just a picture of that day and that event. And then just briefly, I think I'm almost out of time. The UNO's Fellows project. So the UNESCO UNITWIN network has received a small amount of money from the Hewlett Foundation to do a student fellows project. And so what it's about, it's going on this year. And what we're doing is we've got a certain amount of chairs. I'll show you which chairs in a moment. UNESCO chairs in those different countries who have signed up for this project. We've got 8 of them, of the total of them. Not everybody has students and so on. And they bring on board 2 or 3 students. And we pay the students a small stipend. So we've got a little bit of funding for that because we believe in always paying students. And students have got little projects around AI and open education and assessment, kind of all linking these kind of different topics, things that they're interested in exploring, and doing a kind of a little kind of research project. And the idea is it's raising awareness and growing future educators. That's just the countries that are involved. And as you can see, a lovely range, but also comes with challenges of language and time zones and all kinds of things. So it's going to be a very interesting project to see how it works out. And we really have just started. So hopefully I'll be speaking about this in the future. Yeah, so the students, building a sort of joint knowledge, which can be a blog or part of a guidebook, joint activities, raising awareness at the institutions, and then kind of capacity development, like joining online events and participating in online conferences around open education to kind of just grow awareness. And then just kind of lastly, just the challenges. So generally, Paul was saying this, if we could get this working, if we could do this even better than we're doing it now, one of the challenges is awareness, just constantly raising awareness so that students, so that academics will be aware of sharing and openness. And so, amongst the students, there's definitely a lack of awareness. So this is one step we're hoping in the right direction. When I say insufficient collaboration, it sounds very negative, but one of the things that I find is a barrier is that open education is not working sufficiently with open access and open science. It's still, we try and work together, and I can see a lot of the discussion that Paul has been talking about where, open science is built in. I think that's something that really, we really need to be thinking about how we're going to do that. And the other barrier, big challenge, is language. And that's where generative AI might be stepping up, where we can actually use those tools to help us with language. So I think there's quite a lot of potential there to solve that problem. And this is the same message that I think Paul ended with, but this is what it's all about. It's working together to solve problems and to share knowledge and to share culture. And if we're going to solve problems, we need to make it open. That's kind of the only way we're really going to be able to move forward. Okay, I think I'll stop there as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenda. That was an excellent presentation and lots of food for thought. I love the idea of the student fellows. I mean, we're bringing along the next generation and their creative solutions. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to introduce our final speaker. If anybody has any questions, please pop them into the chat or wait and maybe ask them at the very end, and you can unmute and ask yourselves. But I'm going to introduce our final speaker for this afternoon, and that's Paola Corti. Paola is the Senior Open Education Community Expert of Spark Europe, working with the European Network of Open Education Librarians. And she supports librarians in taking action to implement the UNESCO recommendations on OER and helps to bridge the gap between educators and librarians to work close together. So Paola, the floor is yours. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can see my screen now, and I will try to be as brief as possible. So the focus for me today will be mainly on capacity building, because that's what I do together with librarians around Europe. I'm not a librarian myself, just to be very clear. My experience on open education and education at large is more the one of a practitioner who has been creating, adapting, and supporting teachers in creating their own resources. And now that I've been privileged enough to work very closely with librarians, I really would like to stress how powerful their skills are for the open education community to advance faster. So this is to give you the picture of where our librarians are located. It's not a very big network, but it's quite distributed. And you can see from the map that some challenges are embedded, because we refer to the United Nations definition of Europe. And we started having members from all the countries that you can see in the map before 2022. So you can easily do the math and imagine that it comes with its own challenges. But since we believe, all of our members believe in the values of open education, that's why we continue to have a very proficient dialogue. And it comes with its own challenges from time to time, but we are happy to continue this way. So a couple of years ago, we wanted to redesign and co-design together with librarians the new open education strategy. So I came up with this invitation to our librarians to come and write together the new strategic plan on open education to work together. And that's what we did. We focused on librarians as agents of change, and it was, I would say, we are now in 2026, almost middle of the year already, and the progress that they've been, the achievements that they've been working on together are amazing. So let's say that having librarians on your side when you want to advance open education is key, because many other practitioners, including myself, are not as well organized in archiving, in using metadata, and in supporting resources to be more easily findable, not only reusable. Because I totally agree with Paul, licenses are enablers, but then if resources are out there and nobody goes and find them and reuse them, it's like continuously adding new books to a library that nobody knows where to go to. So that's what we try to do together. As you can see from this image, which was created by an artist and shared with an open license, because I'm always stressing that resources are not only educational resources, but any resource that is shared with a license can become an educational resource with a learning purpose. I like this image because it's a good representation of who we are, and it can be easily extended to a global community, a very diverse community of people who stand on the shoulders of each other to build more knowledge, but also consciously sustaining the next generation, the next cohort, the next group of people who are willing to share their knowledge or to build on the previous knowledge that has been shared. And librarians are agents of change on that, because who better than a librarian can help me find the most fitting resource when I'm creating a new teaching material and I have a cohort of students who have very specific needs and I want them to thrive in their learning path. So since they also have a large experience very often in open science, they are also good connectors. I totally agree with Glenda when she previously stressed the importance of connecting the opens and build sufficient as a first and good enough then collaborations among the opens. That's one of the focuses that we have in the network and in Spark Europe at large, connect the opens. So librarians are good because they sit at the crossroads very often of those pathways of open, and they can be extremely helpful in finding practical ways to connect them. Both my colleagues today mentioned the UNESCO year recommendation. We as a network intentionally focused in our strategic plan and we consider ourselves as a part of the large global community of those who are focused on implementing the UNESCO year recommendation. So I'm not pointing you to the UNESCO year recommendation itself now. I would like you to take a look and please consider yourself invited, because UNESCO not only shared the UNESCO year recommendation, but later on worked on guidelines to support the community in implementing each action area. So if you go on the UNESCO library, you can find those guidelines that were actually built starting from a global community effort made voluntarily, and UNESCO took over to make those documents cleaner and also more reliable, together with, let's say, the policy level importance that they have now that they have been published by UNESCO. And I'm talking about this because Paul also mentioned the importance of working at the policy level. So I am one of those, and I'm here today talking about capacity building, which very often happens bottom up. We need policies to make it work faster and more efficiently top down. Having someone like UNESCO working together with all the community members and also with the UNESCO coalition to support the work that every single practitioner around the world is doing, and adding the importance of the policy level work is very important for all of us to fasten the process of having open as the default, I would say. And that's what I wish for all of us. So we've been working in different areas. I've been talking about the policy now, and one of the goals and actions that we took was to start interviewing policymakers around Europe, because Europe is the region where most of our actions happen, and I will talk about other larger actions later. But we started interviewing them to bring their voices out loud and share them with our community members, but with the global community, I would say. And everyone can look into this report to see where policy on open education can support development and encourage investments, because that's what we need, investments. But we are also working as a community in raising awareness of the value of open education, open educational resources, and open education practices, and most of all, stimulate action. So Capacity building again. How do we do that? Our librarians started facilitating workshops years ago now, and we are now, if you look at the bottom right corner, you see that our last workshop was facilitated on the 12th of March, and the new one is upcoming in May. Our workshops are facilitated by librarians working together across countries. Some of them have never been working together before. They are just, I say just, but I think it's very powerful. They are just members of the same network, volunteering their time most of the time to build together more knowledge and share their efforts with the community. Our workshops are open to anyone, and it's nice to share that not only we share the recordings with everything that we create is shared with the CC BY license. We strongly believe that the power of the license is in encouraging everyone to adapt as easily as possible. So that's what we practice. We not only share the recordings of every workshop, but in Zenodo you can always find for each of our workshops the slides shared in an editable format and the workshop plan. Look at this. This is a set of slides that you can find in Zenodo, and you can very easily adapt them. But you can also find the workshop plan, which means that every facilitator not only took care of creating the content in a slide deck, but also they thoroughly prepared a workshop plan that everyone can reuse as a template, if you wish, as our facilitators do in their local context most of the time now, but also as an inspirational document that you might want to explore in order to see if there is anything that can fasten your work. Instead of starting from scratch, you have an element that might help you. And of course, it's also in an editable format, very easily adaptable. This is key for us. Build resources that everyone can easily adapt by default. That's our approach. We are also advocating to make librarians more visible, because building capacity means also recognizing the efforts and rewarding them when possible. So an easy way for us was through encouraging our librarians to share their expertise with their peers, of course recorded, of course shared with a CC BY license in our YouTube channel. So this was a way for them not only to be seen by the larger European community, but beyond those regional borders. And guess what? Sometimes it happened that their own institutions discovered about their work through those videos, and then invited them to sit at decision-making tables around institutional policy making, which is one of the best achievements that we can support them build together with us. Another thing that we did in the past, and I'm happy that Glenda is sitting in this room, because actually I'm pointing now to one of our last episodes of the Pass the Open Education Expert Baton Open Education Cafes, with experts invited from all over the places around the world. This episode was focused on reward and recognition. So as you can see, we try to build bottom up, but we also try to invite guests top down. And this episode of the Open Education Cafe was actually co-hosted by Spark Europe and the European Network of Open Education Librarians and UNESCO. So we organized it together to have guests from different regions. And it was a very interesting discussion about the theme of reward and recognition and how to make it more effective, both at the local and the institutional level, but also at the national level, and hopefully with a larger audience. Back to Zenodo for a moment now. Another way that we adopt to build capacity, as you can see, I'm sharing a lot of practical examples of what we try to do. Some of them are high stake, some others are low stake. This one was high-stake effort. We co-created an NOL toolkit, which was meant to advocate on the benefits of open education for different stakeholders. We are now at the 7th version of the toolkit, and we have it in 26 language versions. You can easily download it from Zenodo, and it contains benefits for students as a first, teachers, institutions, citizens at large, and librarians. The benefits of open education for all these stakeholders, evidence-based, because our librarians looked into published papers to collect those benefits, and then they volunteered their time again and involved colleagues who were more expert than them with the translation sometimes to provide the different language versions. Everything is CC BY. Everything comes in a format that is editable and adaptable, even using, of course, open software. So this is a very small invitation, again, to focus on the practical side of things. Since we've been working so largely focusing on the formats and on editable formats and how to design educational resources really to let this ball continue spinning and ease the work of others in adapting, that's what we are willing to continue sharing. And our next workshop that will be happening live in May is focusing on tips and tricks on how to choose and use media formats practically, very practical angle again, in order to keep users in mind since the very beginning, because that's what we learned to do every time. And last but not least, in our approach to sharing translated version of the NOL toolkit, you see some samples here. We tried our best to facilitate DEI-rich open education practices because, of course, we've been sharing also something about the process that we went through, and we are happy to share it again with others who are interested again, try to fasten their processes in translating resources as quickly as possible and in choosing formats that enable that. Also from the management side, the behind-the-scenes process. And last but not least, we added to this toolkit a game. Because we thought that having the benefits on the table is not enough. So we developed, and you see a printed version here that comes in A4 format, so anyone can print this card deck easily with every very commonly available printing machine. With gameplays that support discussions. So this is an idea that can be reused and adapted to very short meetings. We've been using it with speed date form discussions, but also longer workshops or just discussion meetings when you want to sit with other stakeholders at your institution and advocate for open education through its own benefits, letting them focus on who is benefiting from what and how. So the next picture shows you how the cards appear when cut. And you might recognize that the image of the human pyramid is on the other side of each of them. But there is also a set of cards that you can print and that they come empty, because the invitation is to add your own benefits, those that you feel are important at your local level. If they are not written with the most fitting language, you are invited to also use this tool to write them with your handwriting and invite others sitting with you at the table to do the same. In our way to facilitate DEI-rich practices, Glenda was actually, together with Bianca Mazzucco, our first guest when we decided to extend our Open Education Café series, which was initially created to invite open education champions in our region in Europe to share their experience with open education, why it was important, why librarians could play a very important role in it. And then after inviting champions, we thought, okay, but what can we learn from the other parts of the world? What can our European librarians learn from all the practitioners that are out there in the global community? And that's when we started inviting guests, and Glenda and Bianca came to share with us their experience with the Open Textbook Co-Creation Project. But we continued, and you see, if you reach our NOL for Open YouTube channel, you will see all the recordings of the new and the upcoming event. The next one is going to happen on the 12th of May, and the focus will be on another time on open science and open education meeting each other and building on each other. This is very important work for us. Connecting the opens is a top priority for us at Spark Europe, and we've been intentionally publishing a position paper on Zenodo, again, shared openly with anyone. Everyone is invited to reuse it and adapt it to your local needs. And we invited guests, again, from different contexts to share why the opens need to meet for them, what is in their experience that can be reused by others, and which is the role that librarians can play to advance the opens as connected. So all this work comes with challenges because we cover different time zones, which is a very common issue for all the people in this room, I'm sure. And also, librarians have their own duties. So we try to meet during the lunch break that is the most common around Europe. But guess what? It's not always the same. So it's not always easy to meet. And also, not everyone speaks English as a second language at the same level or can listen to an English meeting with any challenge. We have to take that into account. So we take very extensive meeting notes so that easily anyone can then use their own tools to translate. And this is one of the experimentations that we are willing to engage with, also using AI tools that can equitably support our meetings to be more welcoming for different languages. And the other thing is that many times our librarians don't have official time in their weeks to work on open education, either because their library is not officially involved or their institution is not officially involved. That's where policies are very important because they really become enablers for this kind of everyday effort that librarians are already willing to make, as you can easily see. And also, sometimes they simply are overwhelmed by supporting students, teachers, and researchers in their work. So pooling efforts is one of the keys for us to continue doing the work that we try to do. And we see that it is very important to be welcoming to all sorts of time windows that librarians can put on the shared table and reward them for the effort that they make. It's very important for us. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's important to continue upskilling practitioners. So guess what? Every year, one of our workshops is focused on the basics of open education for anyone. We support mainly librarians at first, but every other practitioner is welcome to start looking into licensing, looking into the remix issues, and looking into where resources can be found at first, and then downloaded, and then adapted, and how to adapt them. So the very basics of open education is always at the bottom of our work. And this is another human pyramid that I always end my presentations with, because that's how we work. That's the only way that I know for us to continue building on each other and supporting each other. So thank you for listening.
Paola, thank you so much for that. There's so many takeaways from that, like just countless, really. And you've shared so many resources that people around the world can also plug in with the YouTube channel, with the Zenodo materials, with the card game. I love the idea of the speed dating around OERs. So, so lots of food for thought. Thank you. It would be great to open the floor now for questions. Does anybody have any questions for our speakers? Yes, please. Joe, if you want to unmute yourself.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you very much. I do have a question in regards to accessibility in regards to disability. I use a screen reader and rely heavily on lip reading and captions, which is why like the Zooms are really great because the captions are fantastic. I also recently started my master's at University College Dublin. It's been an absolutely amazing experience so far. I'm really lucky that my professors are great about captioning their lectures and framing their faces so I can read their lips, but some of the resources are less accessible. My screen reader regularly struggles with the format of a number of the text documents, especially any of the historical text documents. And I'm really curious what initiatives or practices are in place to make these open education resources more accessible to the disability community. Thank you.
Paola, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so first of all, thank you for pointing to that, because this is something that we also can improve largely in the resources that we share. Sometimes, for example, a very simple action that we can take, and not always we've been good enough to do it systematically, is to add an alt text to every image that we share. Okay, so we offer plenty of links, but it's not enough. And this is something that is part of our strategy to improve for the future. For example, one of the things that we are trying to do, and is a way for us to criticize our own resources. Guess what? We are co-creating an annual textbook, an open textbook, of course. It will be published with a CC BY license in partnership with the University of Groningen Press, because they have press books and they have the expertise. But we are applying a checklist to criticize our own resources and pointing which actions can be taken to make them better and more accessible. And we are going to publish the report as part of the open textbook. So the resource will be there as it is now, and we will analyze it through a checklist that will be shared openly with the CC BY license, again, editable format so anyone can download and adapt it, and is also based on universal design for learning principles. So the idea is to start with our own resources and say, okay, is this sustainable for the future? Yes, this action we can embed it systematically when we publish. This might be more challenging for us, but who knows? Another reuser can be more skilled or more prepared to make a new version of our own resources. This is the resource, this is a CC BY license, please go for it. So that's the approach that we are trying to take.
No, it's a very good. I actually did some training on this when I was in Harvard Extension School, but obviously I wasn't paying too much attention, so I should be able to list all the issues. But the main lesson I got from it, of course, is that it is actually relatively easy to clean up your digital content for all these type of issues. You know, like I think scanned PDFs you shouldn't use. There's lots of little bits and pieces, but it's not done though, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of wondering maybe some playbook or resource, some addendum to the OER recommendation, because we do talk about knowledge equity. Now we're talking about, you know, people having the right to supply knowledge and get knowledge from different parts of the world, like knowledge equity. But when you're talking about inclusion, obviously disability is a very obvious one. But it is a shame that in a sense, it's just not a go-to kind of mandate or control or protocol when you're actually populating, let's call it open education resources or LMSs, like you just make mistakes all the time. But the irony of it is that, you know, it can be very expensive being disability compatible, I think, in person, but online you've no excuses. Actually, it's not expensive at all. It's just protocols, and we don't use them. So it's a very good point. It could easily, not easily, but as you say, education with some training courses and protocols on digital objects, it could, a lot of things can be avoided very quickly, actually. Yeah. Hopefully I'm answering, maybe I'm not answering that properly.
No, you are. And the scanned PDFs are actually the biggest problem for me. Like the scanned documents. I did the Ages of Globalization class with Jeffrey Sykes, and Professor Walsh, and the historical scanned documents, trying to read Adam Smith's book, or they had a scan of part of a Bible for the Isaiah 2:4 for the founding of the UN, and I actually couldn't participate in that because of the way the book is scanned. It just would jump through the pages. So I'd get a word here and a word here and 2 words there and a number. And it was like, you know, we're 4 chapters through, but I've gotten 10 words. So the scanned images are absolutely one of the real culprits in my experience. So thank you all very much.
Thanks so much. Does anybody else have a question for our speakers? Well, I have one. So it's about, so there's so many OERs out there. So I'm just wondering, like, about discoverability. You know, I know that there's a company that's set up called Scylla that we're looking to look at reading lists and kind of match OERs and open textbooks to the reading lists. I'm a little bit concerned that that's been taken over now by a company. I wonder, does anybody have anything to say about that?
I've only heard of Scylla in the context actually of the UK. So I know Bristol University was starting it, but I'd be very interested to hear what the views of the other presenters are around that, Scylla particularly. But I mean, I do think that there's, you know, there are these options that are coming out now around discoverability that could be interesting.
So maybe I'm not talking to your point, but one of the problems I see with knowledge in general, the knowledge commons as I call it, is that there is a great lake of knowledge, as they say, out there, but it's hard to find the kind of the best one, you know. I think that's what you mean by discoverability, is it? Is that what you mean? Yeah. So there was, I think, Wellcome Trust funded one group assigned biologists, if I remember it right. And I can't remember the name of the overlay journal, but a couple of academics, and it could be done for OER, this is what I'm saying, started to do kind of refereeing. So the whole idea is that, you know, there's content out there for free, but what you want to do is to present that content as the best course in, let's say, Rockstrom's Planetary Boundaries, let's say. And somehow there's a journal or some way of a committee that would actually referee it and actually would mark it as kind of one of the best contents of that particular topic. So it does go back to information integrity and the role of libraries and actually giving you those traffic lights about what is high quality, what is low quality, what is deemed to be correct or right. So I don't know whether that's been done with OER, but you could see it's been done with peer-reviewed academic journals, but you could imagine it being done with OER, like, and it could be a stakeholder committee or something, just to kind of go, these are the correct policy docs. These are, you know, and you'd have to have some metadata and some archiving and some, you know, I've never seen it, but it could exist. I've never seen it, but it's a very good point, though, is in, you know, outside of Europe and America, everyone's got OER, I guess, and they're doing open science, but what they don't have is what I call the traffic light system. You don't know what's high quality or low quality, and that's a problem. Yeah.
If I may, again, bring in the practitioner perspective, because I think that high quality content, if we start thinking as open education, as let's say coming from open access and open science, I totally agree with what was just said. And it's understandable. You have peer reviewers, you have quality content that is reliable because it comes from great researchers, great teachers, and it's been reviewed and then amended and cleaned. Perfect. Okay. If I think about OERs, I'm thinking about educational resources that might need to be adapted to different audiences. So big open textbooks or big, let's say, also in terms of quantity of knowledge that they contain, resources definitely can go through highways, as you said, Paul. If I think about slides or lessons or lesson plans, then I consider them OER as well. They might be very high quality without any peer review process, only because they come with the open license that you mentioned and an editable format that really lets you continue being responsible for your students and adapt those resources at best, integrating other resources, remixing them. So there are two lenses that make your question, Jane, difficult in this sense, because it's not only literature, it's not only scientific literature. There is a lot in educational resources that goes beyond that. And finding a good balance is maybe more complex, but I'm very hopeful that with the new tools that we have at our disposal, we can do better in the future. So, and librarians can be even more helpful in that, because who better than them know repositories, know how to look into those repositories and support the teaching staff. And then there is all the word available. All practitioners would be happy to jump in and say, oh, why don't you adapt this in this way? Why don't we change the format? Why don't we insert something that comes with a different approach? So that's my...
Yeah, that's excellent. So we can always add on or amend anyway with the license. Graham, would you like to come in there?
Yes, I would. Thanks, Jane, and thanks to our speakers as well. I'll be very brief because I've just noticed the time, which I hadn't noticed for the last hour and a half, which is reflects the quality of this webinar. It was just to pick up on a couple of points, and I should say I'm representing the OEPN Foundation as well as the library publishing section as well. But we don't have. Well, we have a few open textbooks, but it's not something that's within our remit. But just to pick up on something Jane said, but also something Paula and the other speaker said, I think one thing we're lacking, and the comment you made, Jane, about infrastructure going into commercial ownership, it is, I think, a lack of open infrastructure that is open and guaranteed to be open. We're in a good place with journals. We're in a good place with monographs. I don't necessarily think we're in that good place with OERs, and I will happily be corrected on that. And I think the other thing to say is on that as well is this. I guess it's what is quality. If we have got a collection somewhere and it's open infrastructure and it's collecting it, there's a whole conversation we need to have about what do we perceive as quality, and which you've touched on as well, Paula. And I think it's a thorny issue, which I've just opened just as we finish. But I think in order to bring these things together and to list things and to find things and make everything discoverable, I think that's a really big question is how do we decide what is quality, what is not quality? Because peer review doesn't necessarily, as you said, mean that in this case. But I'll stop there.
So I think Graham is leaving us with lots of questions. We may need another webinar to solve some of them. I think we'll have to draw to a close here. Thank you so much to our speakers, Paul, Glenda, and Paula. Thank you to everybody for being here. Jill is just putting in the chat about our next events. We have our next one is on the 22nd of April, and that's on case studies of OERs and textbooks. And then finally, on the 29th of April, we're going to have a workshop on OERs and licensing, and so to kind of build capacity. So thank you all very, very much. If the speakers could share their slides with me, then I can put them into the repository and they'll reach more people. So thanks everybody. It's a great event.
Thank you
for
having us. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jane. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Paola, I think that went really well. That was really good. There's so much in yours alone. There's so much. Did we turn off the recording?